What's the first thing you would focus on when building a house? Is it the flooring? Is it the walls? Or is it the outer shell or the roof? The first thing you would focus on is the foundations. Without solid foundations, everything else you build on top becomes a risk, and you may need to tear it down and start again. Exactly the same is true when you're building out a report. Without solid foundations, the report can become slow and sluggish, and your data may even become inaccurate. You may be forced to rebuild the data model from scratch. The data model is the foundation of any report. In this video, I'm going to give you a very simple example of how a table that contains a lot and all of your information is a lot less efficient than using something like a star schema. So let's head over to my computer, and what you're having a look at here is my tables for orders from resellers. What you have on the left hand side are the sales order number, the line number, the date, ship date, and so on. We have a few keys here, but what I've put in on the right, from column O all the way to column AG, is our reseller information. In essence, what I've done here is keep the reseller information as part of this core table. What you would have if you had a flat table would also be the geographical information, you would have the employee information, and you would have the product information all on this table. So you can imagine the number of columns that this table would have. It would go on and on and on. But I'm going to show you using one example why having a star schema, in other words, a fact table with dimension tables around it, is a lot more efficient. Let's take the reseller as an example. If we hide the key, then what are you left with for the reseller data? You have their phone, business type, their reseller name, and a whole bunch of other information. What you might notice here is that for every single row on this screen, the data is the same. Have a look at this. On every single line, the data is the same. Why? It's because the reseller name is the same in each of these rows. So for this list of order numbers, as you can see on the left, they all go through this particular reseller. Now, if you scroll further down, you will see that this reseller name changes, the information changes, because you have a new reseller. But again, there are multiple rows of duplicate information. Now, why is this important to know? Because when you're dealing with a database that contains millions and millions of rows, the database is going to increase in size massively. Let's take an example. Let's take this first reseller, resale services. There are a total of 91 rows. 91 rows of duplicate data when one row will do. So we don't need to duplicate all of these 18 columns 91 times. Imagine that being on a large scale database. You don't want 20 columns being replicated over 1 million times. That is going to slow down everything. It is going to increase the size of the database, increasing the cost to the company, and it will also mean that any measures and calculations built on this are going to be very slow. So when you have all of your information stored in a table like this, in what is called a flat table, you're going to have a lot of duplication of data. Now think about this. What if, instead of having all of this information replicated, you put it all in one column? That one column contains a unique identifier. So rather than duplicating 18 different columns, you're only duplicating one column that is made of letters and numbers that identifies this particular reseller. Suddenly you've lost 17 of your 18 columns, and multiply 17 by 1 million rows, That's a lot of space you've suddenly clawed back. So that is one of the reasons why it is important to structure your data properly and not have a singular flat table. So now I've brought back the reseller alternate key column. And what this does effectively is act as a unique identifier for this reseller, resell services. So think about this. If we didn't have this column and you wanted to filter the data on resale services, this one particular reseller, then you might want to filter on reseller name. But if more than one reseller has the same name, then what are you going to do? Then you may need to filter on two columns, reseller name and maybe something else like phone number. So you have two columns that you need to filter on in order to identify one particular reseller. But if you have a unique key, then you only need to filter on the unique key. Another reason why it's important to have a unique identifier is because for the computer, it's a lot faster to go through one unique key than it is to look through two different columns, such as phone number and reseller name, in order to identify a filter that you have applied. So take a look at this. So to give you a visual example of how this table can be made smaller, I'm going to flick from this table to another sheet which shows exactly the same information, except we have a reseller key only, and we don't have any additional information about the reseller. The information about the reseller is held in a dim reseller table, which is down at the bottom here. And as you can see, I have already filtered on one reseller. Let me clear that. So we go back to this table. You have one reseller. Rather than duplicating the information hundreds of times, you've only got the number 312 duplicated, which is a lot better than having all of the information duplicated because it decreases the size of the data model. We go to dim reseller, and as you saw, when I filter onto that number 312, you only return one row with all of the data about that reseller. There is no duplication of data, and that is the key here. Because you're not duplicating data, the data model is smaller, and the processes around filtering, such as filtering to one particular reseller, will run faster in your report, which is better for the end user. So I know this is a very basic example, and flat tables can be a lot bigger, which is why you want to stick to fact tables and dimension tables as much as you can. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this.